Kataba! Wang Chong's face suddenly turned solemn. He knew that Kataba was strong, but he hadn't expected him to be this strong. The subtle realm. Kataba's cultivation level had undoubtedly reached the subtle realm, and perhaps even more than that. At the very least, Kataba, who had also reached the subtle realm, was nothing compared to Kataba. Careful! With a grim expression on his face, Wang Chong sent out a mental wave, linking his mind with Wang Zhongxi and the other great generals. Clop! Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong trotted his horse forward and unleashed his own cultivation. A beam of energy rose from Wang Chong's head and pierced through the heavens. Compared to when he had just entered the subtle realm upon his return to the capital, Wang Chong was far stronger. The soul of Arabia, Kataba, possessed a resounding reputation even in the apocalyptic era. Despite Wang Chong clearly having the strength to deal with the behemoths, he had remained out of the battle to conserve his strength precisely because he needed to deal with this most powerful existence in the history of the Arabian Empire. Wang Chong, you, the great Tang, and all of the Central Plains will pay for this. Kataba's thunderous voice was infused with a bone-chilling cold. Kataba did not speak these words with his mouth. Rather, a powerful mental wave carried his voice into everyone's minds. The high priest was really dead. At the start, Kataba thought that this was just a joke and that the man would soon stand up, but none of this was possible. With his psychic energy, Kataba could clearly tell that while the high priest had not suffered any serious injuries, his soul and mind had utterly vanished. His brain had been utterly pulverized. There was no doubt that he had died to some powerful psychic energy attack that had caused his soul to disintegrate. Kataba did not know what had occurred between Wang Chong and the high priest, but there was no doubt that the high priest had completely lost to Wang Chong in the mental domain and died. The high priest had been Kataba's most important friend, and the high priest's shadow had been present in many parts of his ascendancy. His relationship could be considered that of a teacher and a friend, a very deep and sentimental relationship. Kataba had never imagined that the high priest would die to Wang Chong. So powerful. We're no match for him. Everyone, be careful. And Sishun punched away an Arab general and some cavalry as he leaned his body to the side and sent a mental wave to the others. Although Kataba had yet to make his move, and Sishun had sensed an immense pressure from his body. No one except Wang Chong was any match for him on this battlefield, but even Wang Chong was still a little lacking compared to Kataba. Gao Xianji's face chilled as he pushed Abu Muslim back with a palm and called out, "Everyone, watch out! He's about to make his move." Gao Xianji had been through the Battle of Talas and seen Kataba's power, so he knew that subtle realm experts were extremely frightening. Kataba's body was brimming with killing intent, and once he attacked, he was certain to deal immense damage. Wang Chong said nothing, but he was ready. Though they had never clashed before, he could sense from the energy erupting from Kataba's body that this was no easy foe. But what happened was completely different from what had been expected. Whoosh! The air for tens of thousands of feet around Kataba suddenly began to howl and churn like a massive vortex. And in the center of the vortex, Kataba flicked his finger. Boom! An azure beam of energy shot toward the massive bronze cauldron behind him. Bang! The thick chains bound across the top of the cauldron instantly snapped, and the seal over the cauldron was broken. Come out, world-destroying Ifrit! Kataba's voice rumbled like thunder, suffused with savagery and power. Roar! In response to Kataba was a roar that sounded like scraping metal. It was a savage and cruel roar, bursting with a desire to destroy and annihilate. Upon hearing that inhuman roar, the war horses on the battlefield shrieked. Those closest to the cauldron instantly threw aside their training to scatter in every direction, disrupting the ranks of the army around them. Damn! What's going on? Hurry and control those horses! The Arab soldiers cursed in anger, but a moment later, their voices faded away. Boom! An earth-shattering boom came from the cauldron, causing the lid of the cauldron to blast into the air. At the same time, black smoke boiled out of it, mixed with intense flames that soon engulfed the entire cauldron. Nay! All the warhorses on the battlefield shrieked, both Arab and Tang, and those millions of soldiers embroiled in battle all turned to the strange development taking place in the rear of the Arab army. What they noticed was the boiling column of smoke and flames, and a terrifyingly immense pressure. It was like they were frogs being stared at by a snake. What in the world is that? Wang Zhongxi had also noticed this power and instantly grimaced. Over his long career, he had never encountered something like this. Felt even more frightening than a behemoth. At this time, the only person who remained calm was Wang Chong. Finally released it. Wang Chong's face turned solemn. Last night, he had already noticed and probed this massive bronze cauldron. But the high priest had stopped him. This was undoubtedly Arabia's trump card. But Wang Chong didn't know what was inside. Roar! That savage and terrifying roar once more resounded. And a moment later, a ball of fire burst out of the cauldron. Then a hand as large as a house reached out with 5 sharp claws. Everyone finally saw the form of the monster within the cauldron. It was a monster more than 70 meters tall, made of smoke, flame, and lava. It did not have a fixed size. At the start, it had probably been around 30 meters tall, but in just a few seconds, it rapidly expanded as if it was absorbing energy from the air, rising to 70 meters and continuing to grow. Most frightening of all was that pair of giant, curled black horns with a diameter of more than 40 meters, and those burning golden eyes, countless times brighter than the sun and radiating evil and destruction. What in the world is that? Upon sensing the destructive energy from that flame monster, Wang Chong was stunned. Such a terrifying creature stood at the peak of the food chain. Even if he had never seen it before, he should have heard something about it in the apocalyptic era. But despite searching his vast sea of memories, Wang Chong could find nothing that matched up to it. Is this another disturbance created by my interference? Did it cause this monster that shouldn't have appeared to see the light of day again? Wang Chong instantly considered countless possibilities. Changing the course of history had a price, and the most obvious came with the response from spacetime. In his last life, the Great Tang had only one war with Arabia. But because he had defeated Abu Muslim, advanced all the way to Khorasan, and thrown the entire Arabian Empire into turmoil, he had drawn out the legendary Kitaba, resulting in this war of annihilation. But Wang Chong had no time to ponder these things. In the distance, Kitaba had ordered that flame monster to climb out of the cauldron and begin its assault. Bang! With a tremendous explosion, boundless flames erupted from the Ifrit and rained down over a region with a radius of tens of thousands of feet. Aya! An Arab horseman was inadvertently struck by a fireball, and both he and his horse erupted in flames. A few moments later, the Arab horseman had been burned completely black and thudded to the ground. Around him, tens of thousands of Arab horsemen were also caught up in the attack, screaming as they were burned to ash. But the first to fall were those armored giants who had been guarding the cauldron. Even though Kitaba had been the one to bring the Ifrit, it seemed that the world-destroying Ifrit's desire for destruction did not distinguish between friend and foe. If anyone, even Arabs, got too close, they would suffer its attacks. Run! Run! It's the Ifrit! The Arab cavalry paled and began to madly scatter. The Arabs had always been brave and fearless, but that was when they faced enemies they could actually fight. There was no fighting against the Ifrit. Everyone, stand aside, Kitaba coldly ordered, his voice resounding over the battlefield. But there was no need for this order. The countless Arab cavalry parted like water to the sides, leaving a spacious highway tens of thousands of feet wide. No one wanted to stand against the Ifrit. That frightening temperature even roasted the air, causing it to blur. All they wanted was to get as far away from that terrifying being as possible. Bang! A burning ball of lava howled through the air. Watched by countless eyes, the terrifying horned monster with golden eyes strode forward and entered the battlefield. It moved at an incredible pace, each step covering several hundred feet, and everywhere it went, it left flames and lava. And this Ifrit was constantly absorbing energy from the air, and its body was getting larger and larger. Damn! What a frightening thing! Let alone the Tang, even Adnan, who was famed for his madness, felt like there was a dagger at his back and became uneasy. After all, the monster was headed in his direction. Abu Muslim was also shaken, casting aside Gao Xianji and moving to the side in order to avoid this monster. Nay, these trained warhorses had sharper senses than humans, and the Arabs were on the verge of losing their formation as their mounts whinnied in fright. Strange shrieks came from the skies. The giant birds and the other birds had already sensed danger, and before the monster of flames could get close, they had already scattered. King of foreign lands! An anxious shout cut through the howling winds and churning dust. Wang Zhongxi, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, and Sishun, and Gao Xianji all looked up at the sky and began to retreat. Even Abusi and his 20,000 Tongluo cavalry couldn't help but look away from their battle on the steppe with the enemy army and glance at the Ifrit. And their opponents seemed to not be in the mood to use this opportunity to strike against Wang Zhongxi and the others. The appearance of the world-destroying Ifrit had completely altered the battlefield. An energy of pure destruction and brutality swept over the world, causing people to instinctively tremble in fear, even its allies. On the Great Tang side, the 5 other major leaders all turned to Wang Chong. All of them felt an intense danger on the wind. The Arabs had summoned their ultimate trump card, and this monster was undoubtedly even more savage than it appeared. The situation was dire for the Great Tang. Everyone was waiting for Wang Chong's decision. Wang Chong's face slowly turned grave. Giant ballistae, change directions. Ballistae, consecutive fire. Front line withdraw. Craftsman team, repair the steel walls. Wang Chong did not spend too much time ruminating in silence, and he began to issue a string of orders. There was no retreat for the Great Tang. Behind them was an unobstructed road leading all the way to Longxi and the capital. If they could not hold Arabia back at the northwest, then without the steel walls and fighting on flat land, infantry were no match for cavalry. Giving up here meant that the millions of Arab soldiers wouldn't even need the behemoths and the Ifrit to sweep over the 600,000 Tang soldiers. Bang! Gears creaked and groaned as the ballistae and giant ballistae turned around. 10 some giant ballista bolts and 3 to 4,000 ballista bolts formed a probing salvo that hurtled toward the now 100-some meter tall Ifrit. In this chaotic battlefield, the Ifrit's massive body served as the best target for the ballistae. Plush! 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 Lava splattered as the giant ballista and regular ballista bolts sunk into the Ifrit's body. On the vast battleground, Wang Chong, Wang Zhongxi, Gao Xianji, and countless others stared at that massive being made of fire. But then a frightening development occurred. Those 3,000-some sharp ballista bolts seemed to evaporate into steam, not even causing a ripple on the surface of the Ifrit's body. As for the 10-some giant ballista bolts that could kill behemoths, 3 of them shot out of the Ifrit's back, but otherwise they seemed to have no effect. It seemed that the Ifrit did not have a physical body, and so physical attacks could not injure it. Hiss! Su Hanshan gasped, his face paling. Zhangqiu Jianxiong, Gao Xianji, and Sishun scowled. The ballistae and giant ballistae were the Great Tang's most powerful tools, weapons that instilled fear in the hearts of the Arabs. But these two were entirely ineffective, meaning that the Great Tang had lost its best weapons. Even more frightening was that if the Ifrit had no physical body, it meant that many other methods were also useless against it. Everyone suddenly understood why Kataba had left this monster for the very end to serve as the ultimate trump card. Everyone felt a deep chill in their hearts. Roar! As the first probing attack concluded, the soldiers at the front line began to retreat, with some soldiers remaining to hold the rear. At this moment, a furious roar brimming with a desire to destroy resounded through the world, and the earth shuddered. In the center of the Arab army, the terrifying Ifrit raised its head, opened its maw, and spewed out frightening crimson flames into the sky. Not good. Hurry and retreat. Wang Chong's eyes widened as he sensed an immense danger, and he immediately pressed his body against his horse and charged toward the front line. But while Wang Chong had reacted quickly, he was still too slow. Despite the increased vigilance and various speculations about the Ifrit's power, they were all vastly underestimating its might. Bang! The scorching flame arced through the sky like a giant bridge and then rapidly plunged into the retreating Tang army. Rumble! The earth shuddered under the astonishing might of the Ifrit's attack. A pool of lava rapidly expanded in the middle of the Tang army, and hundreds of armored Tang soldiers were instantly engulfed without even having time to scream. The retreating Tang army was cut in two. The lava rapidly expanded into a raging torrent that continued to sweep over the surrounding Tang soldiers. Aya! Screams tore through the air as thousands of soldiers failed to escape in time and were swallowed up by the lava, their bodies igniting into flames and burning to ash. The lava was simply moving too quickly, and the battlefield was too densely packed for there to be enough time and space to run. Run! The eyes of the Tang generals went red. The situation had changed too abruptly. In just a few short moments, at least 3,000 Tang soldiers had been lost to the high-temperature flames, and the losses were continuing to climb. But what was most frightening of all was this. Roar! The world-destroying Ifrit continued to spew out lava, and at the last moment, everyone could only stare in shock as the Ifrit opened its massive maw and spewed its entire body, transforming into a stream of lava flying toward the middle of the Tang army. Not good. Wang Zhongxi and the others immediately sensed something and rushed toward the area. Roar! A moment later, as everyone stared in disbelief, in the center of the Tang army, a massive claw emerged from that torrent of lava and reached toward the sky. With a massive boom, the terrifying form of the Ifrit rose up in the middle of the Tang army. Through this method of rapid movement, it had cut off the retreat of the Tang army. Boom! The savage Ifrit raised an arm made of lava and flames and swiped. On the ground, several hundred cavalry from the southwest in the middle of retreating instantly vanished amidst the flames, their screams still echoing through the air. Meanwhile, those steel walls that had been reinforced through countless inscriptions and formations rapidly melted under the monstrous heat radiating from the Ifrit. Whoosh! The Ifrit opened its mouth and spewed out another gout of lava, instantly vaporizing several hundred Tang soldiers. In fact, just by moving around, without the application of any special ability, the Ifrit caused the losses of the Tang army to skyrocket. In front of this world-destroying creature that had destroyed an entire civilization, the strength of mortal armies was insignificant. For the Ifrit, even the most elite of soldiers were still puny ants. Thwish, thwish, thwish. At this crucial moment, the master archer unit under Chun Burang loosed a volley of arrows that whistled through the air toward the Ifrit's golden eyes. The Ifrit's entire body was covered in flames, so attacking it would be completely ineffective. Chun Burang determined that its two eyes were its only possible weakness. But Chun Burang had overestimated himself and his master archers while underestimating the Ifrit's strength. The intense flames around the Ifrit's body constantly revolved around it at high speeds. When that volley of arrows was still 200 to 300 feet away, they were melted into slag by the extreme heat. Upon seeing this, Chun Burang felt his heart freeze. But this was only the beginning. Sensing the attacks from the master archers, the Ifrit turned around and swung a massive fist. A gout of dark flame turned into a stream of lava that immediately hurtled toward Chun Burang and his master archers. The faces of Chun Burang and his master archers instantly turned ghastly white. A casual punch from the Ifrit had a temperature in the tens of thousands of degrees, perhaps even 100,000 degrees. This high temperature could even burn away space, let alone their fleshly bodies. This one strike was certain to kill them all. Bang! Just when Chun Burang and the master archers were all about to die, a slender figure appeared in the sky. The stream of lava was pulled upon by an invisible force, swerving in a massive arc and crashing down elsewhere. In the distance, the world-destroying Ifrit was venting its passion for destruction and constantly attacking the Tang army. But when it saw what had happened, it momentarily froze. It apparently had not expected a human to be able to alter the trajectory of its attacks and make its stream of lava land elsewhere. The great Yin-Yang heaven creation art. Only Wang Chong was capable of this feat after he had reached the subtle realm. This art had reached a divine and indescribably profound level. It was now even capable of affecting the Ifrit stream of lava. Die! Wang Chong hovered in the air as he coldly stared at the massive monster. Rumble! As the Ifrit was momentarily taken aback, an unexpected development occurred. Behind the Ifrit, a massive creature charged with incredible speed and slammed into the Ifrit. The massive rhino horn pierced through the Ifrit's body like a sharp sword, the tip protruding out of the Ifrit's chest. Awoo! The Ifrit howled in fury at this unexpected attack, its massive body staggering forward 2 steps under the charge of the rhino behemoth. What's going on? Why is our behemoth attacking the Ifrit? On the other side of the battlefield, the Arab soldiers were all struck dumb. The Ifrit was clearly on their side, but the behemoth, which was also on their side, had helped the Tang by attacking the Ifrit. It's being mentally controlled. On the distant elephant behemoth, Kitaba coldly turned his gaze on Wang Chong. The high priest had created a psychic seal on all the behemoths precisely so that Tala's would not be repeated, but surprisingly, Wang Chong had managed to undo the psychic seal and once more take control of the behemoths. On this battlefield, only the high priest was capable of controlling these beasts. There was no doubt that Wang Chong had obtained this ability from his battle with the high priest. I will make you and all the East pay for this. Kitaba's face chilled even more. Ifrit, kill it. Even though Wang Chong had already taken control of the behemoth and used it against the Ifrit, Kitaba had no intention of coming forward. A monster that had once destroyed an entire civilization was not so easy to deal with. If the Ifrit were really that easy to kill, he would have never brought it to the East to serve as his ultimate trump card. Bang! As if in response to Kitaba's thoughts, the Ifrit roared, and its right hand made of smoke, flames, and lava turned around and thrust straight through the rhino behemoth's massive body. Even the rhino behemoth's thick armor, reinforced with countless inscriptions and formations, was unable to hold, and a massive scorched hole was blasted straight through it. It was even possible to see the Tibetan plateau through the other side. What terrifying ability! What is this monster? On the distant Tibetan plateau, a figure exuding a storm of energy was watching all this take place. When he saw that massive Ifrit punch through the behemoth, Namri Songtian was deeply shaken, his eyes brimming with shock. Both Arabia and the Great Tang were simply too strong. With the Yusang Empire greatly weakened, not even a great general like Namri Songtian had the power to intervene, or even dare to take advantage of the chaos. When the elephant and lion fought, a wolf trying to interfere would simply be pulverized into dust. This was the state the countries of the Northwest were in. But what left Namri Songtian the most terrified was the monstrous Ifrit. The behemoths were frightening enough, their peerless strength and immense vitality making it so that even the Great Tang's giant ballisti and behemoth slayers had yet to finish clearing them out. Yet that Ifrit had punched right through a behemoth. Awoo! With a pained howl, the rhino behemoth staggered back 2 steps and then collapsed to the ground, the earth shuddering once or twice as dust fountained into the air. Flames rapidly began to ignite on the behemoth's body. An elemental body, immense strength, high-temperature flames. Namri Songtian felt his soul shiver in fear. There was no question that this was something Arabia had prepared to conquer the East, and if its target had been Yusang instead of the Great Tang, the Tibetans would have been utterly crushed. And the Arabs had probably not restricted their ambitions to just the Great Tang. At this time, Namri Songtian suddenly hoped that the Great Tang could win, because Namri Songtian truly couldn't think of any faction besides the Great Tang that could deal with this terrifying monster. No matter how many armies one had, the strength of mortals could not suppress this monster. Namri Songtian was far from the only person with this thought. The world-destroying Ifrit. It's actually real. On the western Turkic steppe, Great General Wunu Shibi, his energy completely restrained, had a similarly grave expression. Not far from him, the Tongluo cavalry were battling with the Arab cavalry, but Wunu Shibi had predicted this and had elected to keep his distance from the battle. However, that nearby battle had ceased to attract his attention. What frightening strength! Burning to oblivion all things, blasting through even steel. It all depends on how the Great Tang deals with it. If they fail, today will be the end of the Great Tang. Wunu Shibi muttered, a strange feeling in his heart. The Great Tang was the eternal foe of the Turks, but Wunu Shibi felt no joy. Kitaba was a legend of Arabia, a legendary invader. The teeth would feel the chill when the lips were gone. Once the Great Tang fell, The remaining countries of the East would be Kataba's next target. But not all the countries of the East had the king of foreign lands and his steel defense line. In the southeast and southwest, there were many more people watching this grandiose battle, and what had happened had far surpassed their expectations. The appearance of the Ifrit had made countless people pale in unease. Roar! A savage roar echoed through the world. The massive Ifrit, after punching through the rhino behemoth, seemed to be further enraged, the lava flowing across its body beginning to madly surge. Boom! The Ifrit opened its mouth and unleashed a torrent of lava and flames, dark smoke belching out and engulfing the area. The flames and smoke turned into a giant black curtain that engulfed half the battlefield. And the even more shocking development was still to come. Bang! A ball of viscous lava and flames, dragging a long trail of smoke behind it, plunged from the sky like a meteor. A moment later, there was a savage roar, and out of the lava and flames rose an Ifrit clone that was around 2 meters tall. 1, 2, 3. One roar after another rose up over the battlefield, and a few moments later, small Ifrits had emerged in an area of about 70,000 feet around the Ifrit and swiftly begun to attack the stunned soldiers around them. Careful! While the sounds of warning were still ringing in their ears, several Tang and Arab soldiers were embraced by the Ifrit clones and died painful and fiery deaths. Retreat! 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 In the distance, Adnan was alarmed by this sight. It was simply impossible to control a world-destroying monster like the Ifrit. Although the Hierophant was already doing his best to suppress it, the Ifrit's inherent desire to destroy was not possible to restrain. Any Arab that got too close would be annihilated by its attacks like anyone else. He now understood why the Hierophant had left this trump card for the very end. How is this possible? This beast has an ability like that? Most shocked of all were the great Tang soldiers. This Ifrit was as massive as a behemoth, but it did not have a physical body and could not be harmed by physical objects. Moreover, its strength was immense and it could control extremely hot flames and lava. These abilities made it terrifying enough, but to everyone's consternation, it could split itself into countless, burning men. This was more than enough to annihilate an army. This is terrible. Retreat. All soldiers of insufficient strength should withdraw. Xianxia Jianxiong, Gao Xianji, and Sishun all turned ghastly pale. The Ifrit itself was hard enough to deal with, and with the addition of the thousands of burning men, the situation became even worse for the great Tang. Rumble. Waves of heat swept across the battlefield, making it as hot as a furnace, and dark smoke filled the air, obstructing everyone's vision. In the face of this monster of unprecedented power, countless soldiers were in full retreat. The steel defense line that Wang Chong had painstakingly built was useless against the Ifrit and its numerous small clones. And as the Ifrit saw the Tang army retreating, it let out a thunderous roar. The burning men quickly went off in pursuit, and the Ifrit, its eyes ice-cold despite being wreathed in flames, also strode forward in pursuit. But at this moment, bang! A blazing red sun as massive as a mountain suddenly appeared, instantly crashing toward the Ifrit's head the moment it manifested. The terrifying force of this sudden assault sent fire bursting out from the Ifrit's head and its feet staggering backward. Awoo! The Ifrit howled in pain for the first time since its appearance. Wang Zhongxi, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, and Sishun, hurry and help me! Wang Chong's resounding voice was ice-cold as it rang out in everyone's ears. What had happened just now left everyone shocked. Even the Arabs had done their best to avoid the Ifrit. Only Wang Chong had remained calm and composed throughout and begun to take countermeasures. Awoo! There was another howl as Wang Chong took control of another behemoth, this one in the form of a water buffalo, making it raise its hooves and charge at the Ifrit. If the Ifrit did not die, all of the great Tang soldiers in the northwest would die. The water buffalo behemoth bellowed as it crashed against the behemoth's body. Immediately afterward, Wang Chong seized control of a second behemoth, and then a third, a fourth. When defeating the high priest, Wang Chong had devoured his forbidden art sea, so he had naturally obtained the knowledge within. As time passed, Wang Chong digested more and more of this knowledge, so he was able to more quickly take control of the behemoths. Hurry! Go! Ordinary attacks are no good, but stellar energy still has an effect. With no further hesitation, Wang Zhongxi, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, and Gao Xianji shot into the air toward the Ifrit. When Wang Chong had attacked earlier, all of them had been able to see that while the sun created through the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art had not been able to kill the Ifrit, its aura had slightly dimmed upon taking Wang Chong's subtle realm attack. This was completely different from the attacks of the giant ballistae. While this Ifrit didn't have a physical body, it still had weaknesses, could still be defeated. This discovery was a shot in the arm for the entire army. Boom boom boom. Neither Wang Zhongxi nor Zhangqiu Jianxiong was an ordinary expert. They were the finest commanders of the Great Tang, possessing top-class strength. In the blink of an eye, the great generals had appeared around the Ifrit. Furious roars continued to be heard as waves of energy pummeled the Ifrit in the center of the battlefield. At the same time, waves of heat swept outward, scorching the very air itself. If they were fighting individually, Zhangqiu Jianxiong or any of the others would have never been a match for the Ifrit, but as Wang Chong was holding down the front, the rest of them felt less pressure. It's effective. As the balls of stellar energy exploded on the Ifrit, it was clear that it was getting weaker. Exhilarated, Gao Xianji and the others redoubled their assault. Boom! As 5 of the Great Tang's major leaders attacked the behemoth, the blare of a horn came from the rear of the Arab army, a lingering and ancient sound. Countless Arab generals turned and saw icy-faced Qutb swing down his arm from atop the elephant behemoth. Ha! It's not that easy to retreat in one piece. Adnan coldly laughed as he turned back around, immediately understanding what the Hierophant wanted. All soldiers, attack. Don't let them run. Adnan immediately urged his horse into a gallop and charged off in pursuit of the retreating Tang army. They first retreated so that the Ifrit could hold down the leaders of the Tang army, and then they would attack again. Without the 5 commanders, the Great Tang would be powerless to stop them. Kyle! The air instantly resounded with war cries as the Arab cavalry transformed into a flood of steel and killing intent, rushing at the Tang army with a mountain-toppling momentum. They had all seen the power of the Ifrit. With this ally on their side, the Great Tang was no match. Careful! Shield soldiers to the front and spearmen behind. Defensive formation. Enemy attack. Man the defense line. As the Arab army surged forward, the Tang soldiers instantly grimaced. More than half of the defense line had been lost under the attacks of the Ifrit and its firemen, and the Ifrit was on the verge of punching a hole straight through it. Without the steel defense line, stopping the cavalry charge was impossible. More importantly, in the current situation, there was no way they could outrun the cavalry. Rumble! The earth trembled and dust churned as tens of thousands of red-eyed Arabs charged over, swiftly riding around the Ifrit. As they got closer and closer, a nervous tension swept over the army. Ready! Release! At this moment, a cold and aloof voice spoke. Gears groaned, and the air howled as tens of thousands of ballista bolts took flight, a black cloud of locusts that engulfed the Arab cavalry at the very front. Plush! 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 The ballista bolts pierced through flesh, cutting down tens of thousands of Arab cavalry like stalks of wheat. The inertia of their charge continued to carry their corpses forward in clouds of dust. Blood flowed freely across the land, and upon seeing that frightening killing power, the vast sea of Arab cavalry paused. Even the distant Adnan lost a little of his savagery. In order to avoid being swept up in the Ifrit's attacks and provoking its killing instinct, the Arab army had retreated, increasing the distance between it and the Tang army. But this had also given Su Hanshan and the ballista army more space to work with. Release again! His expression cold, Su Hanshan swung his arm down again, and the ballista army revealed its savage face once more. The air thundered as another vast swath of Arab cavalry was slain. Large holes punched through their chests. The power of the ballista army quickly allowed the rest of the army to stabilize. Xue Qianjun, I leave the vanguard to you. Even if you have to die, you have to hold against their first wave. Su Hanshan's cold voice rang out over the front line. Waves of heat continued to sweep over the battlefield. The threat of the Ifrit was as ever-present as one's shadow. Wang Chong, Wang Zhongxi, Zhangqiu Jianxiong. All the elite commanders of the Great Tang were doing all they could to hold down the Ifrit. They had no strength or energy to command the army. At this time, Su Hanshan rapidly took the reins of command. Although he had yet to reach the great general level, at times of crisis, Su Hanshan could display the necessary daring a great general required to hold the line. Everyone, follow me. Goose Pond Formation. Upon hearing Su Hanshan's voice, Xue Qianjun clenched his teeth, raised his sword, and gathered his men to face the Arabs. Wuxiang cavalry, hear my order. Prepare to charge. In another area, Li Sai took out his giant sword, rising to the occasion. His brave and fearless voice sweeping across the battlefield and raising the morale of the entire army. The bravest general, the most stalwart figure, the clearest mind. After the Battle of Talas, Li Sai's reputation had spread throughout the Central Plains. He was possibly the only person who could rally an army through his personal strength and courage. Rumble. The Wuxiang cavalry quickly gathered behind Li Sai, their swords leaving their sheaths and gleaming with cold light. Mo Saber Unit, where are you? Kong Xian, the Mo Saber Unit is under your command. Anyone who retreats is to be executed. With another great rumble, the tens of thousands of Mo Saber units, their raised Mo Sabers forming a forest of steel, gathered next to the Wuxiang cavalry, exuding an intimidating aura. Just like how Su Hanshan had become the spiritual leader of the ballista army, Li Sai was the heart of the Wuxiang cavalry and Mo Saber unit. As long as Li Sai was there, the army's morale would never crumble. Big Dipper Army. Prepare for battle. Chang Qianli and Shi Yuanqing also came forward to take command. The Nine Dragon Army, the various protectorate armies, the Imperial Army. In just a few moments, the entire Tang army had reformed. On the other side, despite the powerful hindrance of tens of thousands of ballistae, the Arab flood was unstoppable. Boom! In just a few moments, the two armies were fiercely clashing, and the Ifrit's clones also entered the battle. Whoosh! A vicious tongue of flame shot through the air, and Sishan only barely managed to dodge it. While the two armies had restarted their battle, Wang Chong and the others were in a fierce battle of their own. Boom! The massive Ifrit swung down an arm, causing gouts of lava and flame to spray outward, so blindingly bright that it was hard to open one's eyes. Origin Immortal Art. Life Execution. 8 Ultimate Sunderings. White Tiger Swallows the Stars. Emperor Dragon Fist. Wang Chong, Gao Xianji, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, and Sishan, all of them were constantly shifting around as they unleashed powerful attacks on the Ifrit at the center, barraging its body with blows. The most surprising performance came from Wang Zhongxi. His moves were simple yet exuded a tyrannical aura. These were moves that had sublimated the complex into the simple. Most importantly, just like Wang Chong, he had also reached the subtle realm. With each attack, he could open up a passage through dimensions, draw out the energy from that different dimension, and throw it against the Ifrit, sending flames splashing everywhere. But despite all this, their situation had not changed. Awoo! The Ifrit bellowed, its sea of high-temperature flames scorching the stellar energy on their bodies. Not only that, whenever their attacks struck the Ifrit, the flames and lava that erupted from its body would fall on the ground and transform into more firemen. Not all of these firemen surged to the front line. Some of them turned around to attack Wang Chong and the other commanders. Boom! The Ifrit, apparently incensed, suddenly stomped down. The earth trembled as a wave of heat more than 30 meters high rose up around the Ifrit and swept outward. Gao Xianji had just dodged to the back of the Ifrit and launched an attack when an edge of this high-temperature wave of flame struck him. Bzzz. Gao Xianji panicked and immediately dodged to the side. It was a rather swift reaction, but it was still too slow. Bang! Gao Xianji's body shuddered, and then he was blasted back by a tongue of flame. Not good. Everyone felt like their hearts had seized up when they saw this. Rah! The Ifrit's golden eyes flashed with cold light as it roared, and then a massive arm wrapped in destructive flames swung toward Gao Xianji. Such was the power in this fist that before it had impacted with anything, it was already causing depressions in the fabric of space. With the Ifrit's power, if Gao Xianji were struck by this punch, all of his stellar energy would instantly explode, leaving him either heavily injured or dead. Careful! Everyone instantly paled. Zhangqiu Jianxiong and Sishun and Wang Zhongxi immediately lunged toward Gao Xianji. Beforehand, in order to dodge the Ifrit's attacks, they had scattered themselves around the Ifrit and had maintained a certain distance from it. But this had now become a fatal flaw. Even the closest one, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, was several hundred feet away, and he also had flames blocking his path. There was no way he could make it in time. The Ifrit's punch hurtled toward Gao Xianji, blocking out the sun, and everyone's hearts sank. At this moment, Wang Chang's extremely cold voice came from overhead. "Let me try." Bzzz. The sun and moon appeared, and with these two sources of powerful pull, Wang Chong pulled the Ifrit's arm to the side while also pulling Gao Xianji the other way, immediately increasing the distance between the two. Rumble. In an explosion of flames, the Ifrit's punch missed. Roaring in anger, it locked its eyes on Wang Chong and punched. In a flash of light, Wang Chong swiftly dodged by a hair. But the fact that it had missed only made the Ifrit angrier. The fires on its body swelled, its attacks intensified, and terrifying heat scorched the air, creating thick black smoke. "Not good. They can't hold," Li Junxian called out from the rear of the army. There was a determined look in his eyes as he gripped his sword. "Elder junior sister, I leave the rear to you." Before Li Junxian had finished speaking, he shot away, the noble sage sword gleaming in his hand. Wang Chong and Wang Zhongxi were incredibly strong, but they were still not enough to deal with the Ifrit and its lack of a physical body. From Li Junxian's perspective, purely through its vast sea of flames and waves of heat, the Ifrit had completely suppressed the five commanders. Wang Chong and Wang Zhongxi were on the defensive and had no time to launch any counterattacks. They alone were far from enough. Righteous River. Li Junxian was still several thousand feet away when he raised his divine sword and unleashed a dazzling river of milky white sword chi. It seemed like the Milky Way as it cut through space and sliced into the flames around the Ifrit's body. Although this attack could not deal lethal damage to the Ifrit, the flames around the Ifrit substantially weakened. Most importantly, the Ifrit turned its attention to Li Junxian. At the same time, Righteous Alliance Lord Song Yuanyi glanced at the distance, his eyes in turmoil. "You go and help General Li. I'll go and lend them a hand." A moment later, Song Yuanyi vanished in a shriek of air. Behind him, Xie Guangting gave one last glance before swiftly heading for the battlefield. Roar! Elsewhere, a fireman more than 2 meters tall roared as it punched, sending a shield soldier flying through the air. Kill! Spears thrust and sabers slashed, but it seemed like they were attacking the air for all the damage they did to the fireman. But just when that fireman was about to attack several more Tang infantry, boom! A massive pillar of cold water descended from the heavens. Hiss! The water pierced through the fireman, unleashing a cloud of steam, and in a flash, the seemingly unkillable fireman was gone. Ordinary attacks have no effect on them. Try and find water to use against them. This will be more effective than any of your other attacks. The lone silence ancestor's voice echoed in their ears, the man himself shooting over their heads to kill another fireman with a single punch, after which he began to rush in Wang Chong's direction. Water countered fire. The firemen created by the Ifrit shared its indestructibility. On this battlefield, possibly only the lone silence ancestor was capable of easily killing them with a single strike. No good. The northwest lacks water. This area is too arid. The lone silence ancestor creased his brow, his calm exterior concealing his anxiety. Underneath the city of steel was a layer of hard rock, and to the north was the Mohian desert. This environment had a dire shortage of water. The amount of water the lone silence ancestor could extract from the ground was too little. For the most part, he had to consume his own energy to deal with these firemen. Water! Where can I get water? The lone silence ancestor swept his gaze across the battlefield, But where could one find enough water to deal with the Ifrit in such short order? At his moment of panic, a heaven-shaking cry resounded over the battlefield. Kyle! In the distance, Adnan waved the blade of Makalla and led the Arab governors and deputy governors in a charge. Ignoring the battle taking place between the Ifrit and Wang Chong's group, they charged straight into the battlefield. Forget the Tang great generals. Use this chance to slaughter their officers and soldiers. Adnan had a smug expression, and his eyes glowed with bloodlust. Without the commanders present, he could crush these people like ants, like that minor general commanding the ballisti or the leader of the MO Saber unit. They were simply no match for him, and once he killed these higher-ranked commanders, the rest of the army would be doomed. They're finally here. Seeing Adnan and those Arab governors and deputy governors charging toward his ballisti, Su Hanshan turned grim. Wang Chong, Zhangzhou Jianxiong, and the others were fighting with the Ifrit, but none of the Arab generals went to disrupt their battle. Su Hanshan was keenly aware that the Arabs were not showing mercy, simply pursuing a different objective. Release! Boom! 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 With a swing of his arm, the skies were filled with ballista bolts. It's useless, Adnan coldly laughed. While the Tang ballisti were effective against ordinary soldiers, they were useless against peak great general experts like him. Boom! With a wave of his hand, Adnan sent out a pitch-black torrent of stellar energy that knocked aside the ballista bolts when they were still thousands of feet away. Everyone, hear my order. Kill. Adnan had just raised the blade of Makalla and ordered a charge when his voice came to a sudden stop. A roar came from above his head, and then a massive shadow blotted out the sky, rapidly expanding as it hurtled toward Adnan and the Arab soldiers around him. Giant ape! That massive silhouette was none other than the red-haired arm of a giant ape. Adnan cried out in alarm, his face paling. The Arabs no longer had many behemoths, and almost all of them had been seized by Wang Chong to use against the Ifrit. No one had expected this giant ape to change targets and attack the Arab soldiers, and there had been no sign of this beforehand. Run! With no time to think, Adnan erupted with stellar energy and slashed the blade of Makalla at the red-haired ape, simultaneously shooting off to the side and leaving a blur in the air. Adnan had no desire to fight this beast directly, because he clearly recalled that the behemoth army was led by this red-haired king ape. The king ape was far stronger than all the other behemoths, and its skin and bones were as tough as steel. It possessed both impressive defense and berserk strength. The longer the battle and the more damage it sustained, the stronger and more terrifying it would become. Boom! The king ape's massive fist descended, causing the ground within 1,000 feet to shudder and shooting loose rocks and chunks of dirt several hundred feet into the air. The tremendous power of this strike immediately engulfed the battlefield in a cloud of dust. Ah! Several Arab governors and deputy governors cried out in shock, and with no time to dodge, they expanded their barriers of stellar energy. But a moment later, they screamed as the king ape's terrifying attack shattered their stellar energy and smashed them into the earth. Horses shrieked as they were crushed into meat pancakes, along with all the Arab cavalry in the area. They were even weaker, so they were even less of a match for the king ape. But this was only the beginning. The sky darkened once more as yet another silhouette rapidly expanded. Before the army could react, yet another fist smashed into the dense ranks of the Arab cavalry, provoking a chorus of screams. Trying a sneak attack against the Great Tang? Did you get my permission? Wang Chong's icy voice rang out over the battlefield. Even though he was being held down by the Ifrit, Wang Chong was still keeping a close watch on the battlefield, even splitting his attention to control the king ape so that it could wreak havoc in the Arab army. Through his experience at the Battle of Talas, Wang Chong had grown much more proficient at controlling ape behemoths, and most frightening of all was that Wang Chong specifically had the king ape attack the Arab governors, deputy governors, and generals. The giant ape is coming. Run! Bastard! Hurry and kill it! The Arab ranks fell into turmoil, resounding with screams. The king ape under Wang Chong's control did not care who stood in its way, rushing here and there and almost splitting the battlefield in half. Beast! Stellar energy surged into the air as several furious and fearless Arab governors rose into the air and attacked the king ape. but they had barely risen up when the king ape sent them flying like cannonballs. The king ape was the apex of the behemoth army, and in terms of physical strength it was equal to an early subtle realm expert. Only a scant few were able to reach this level of power. Even the Arab war god, Qutayba, had only broken into this level at the Battle of Talas. We're no match for it alone. Everyone go together and use ritual tools on it, a powerful Arab governor said. The moment he spoke, tensome governors and deputy governors converged from all sides, attempting to work together to subdue the beast. If the behemoth were allowed to wreak havoc in the army, the consequences would be unimaginable. Arabia did not have the giant ballistae of the Great Tang, but they had underestimated both the king ape and Wang Chong. The king ape suddenly pressed its body to the ground and began to move around on all four limbs, moving left and right, spinning around halfway, twisting and turning, attacking before the Arab governors could complete their encirclement while constantly shifting positions. Boom! 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 Explosions rang out over the earth as dust churned through the air. In just a few moments, the governors and deputy governors had been broken, either fleeing with heavy injuries or killed on the spot. Moreover, the king ape's movements were clean and vicious. Rather than a behemoth, it was more like a seasoned warrior. The king ape already possessed frightening strength. Coupled with Wang Chong's warrior mind and experience, it was simply unstoppable. Under the king ape's attacks, the Arab cavalry could only scream as they were crushed like ants by the thousands. Only the high priest could stop Wang Chong from controlling the behemoths, and the high priest was now dead, leaving no one to stop him. Kill! The great Tang side was invigorated by this sight. Arabia had its Ifrit, but the great Tang was not powerless. At this moment, the Tang soldiers began their counterattack. Meanwhile, Su Hanshan, Li Sai, and Chang Qianli seized the moment to engage in their own attacks. In flash, the Arabs had lost their upper hand and fallen into disarray. Thud! 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 As bodies dropped to the ground, the Arab army began to crumble. Damn it! In the rear of the army, let alone Lucas, who was still controlling the moon god tree, even Qutayba turned grim, his fists clenching as a cold aura began to exude from his body. Bang! Suddenly, Qutayba stepped forward, a sharp light in his eyes. Kill it! Qutayba's voice swept across the battlefield, and the effects were almost immediate. The Ifrit suddenly roared and increased in power, its temperature of 100,000 some degrees rising again. Back up! Zhangqiu Jianxiong and the others called out in alarm and backed away. The Ifrit used this chance to break free and swiftly stride over toward the king ape. Its body seethed with flames, and its power was far more terrifying than the king ape's. This monster from an ancient era could absorb energy from the depths of spacetime. After fighting with Wang Chong and the others for so long, it had been significantly weakened, but at this moment, its body flashed with red light, and new energy began to seep out of the void and into the Ifrit's body. In a flash, not only did the ancient Ifrit restore its original power, it grew even stronger. Upon seeing this, even Wang Chong grimaced. And then, to his greater consternation, "Awoo!" The Ifrit roared, upon which the black smoke around it doubled in density. At the same time, Fush! A thin tendril of flame burst out of the black claws of the Ifrit's right hand, extending forward as if it were a living creature. In the blink of an eye, it had extended to a length of some 7,000 feet, a whip of fire and smoke. Crack! The Ifrit locked onto the king ape, wreaking havoc in the Arab army, and cracked the whip. The golden whip cleaved through the air in a massive arc to wrap around the king ape. All of this happened so suddenly that even Wang Chong was alarmed, his face paling. He could tell at a glance that the flame whip was monstrously powerful. But this was the first time in this battle the Ifrit had even used such an ability. But while Wang Chong was shocked, it did not affect his reaction time. Bang! Just when the tip of the flame whip was about to wrap around the king ape's body, the king ape lunged into the air, narrowly escaping its grasp. But the Ifrit seemed to show no signs of giving up on its prey. Debris and dust flew into the air as the Ifrit squatted its massive body, building up strength in its legs for a flying leap. Suddenly, There was a boom of thunder above the Ifrit's head, and a shadow was cast down from the sky. The Ifrit looked up in surprise and saw dark clouds gathering above it, countless silver snakes crawling within them. Boom! Before the Ifrit could react, a bolt of lightning countless times more dazzling than the sun cleaved down like a sharp sword. With one strike, it blew apart the Ifrit's head, causing its body to stagger backward and naturally ending its attempted jump. Lightning flash. At the final moment, a slender figure appeared at the Ifrit's head, gripping the Origin Immortal Sword and unleashing a blow that could cleave open the earth. Wang Chong had used the Origin Immortal Sword and its power of lightning to strike the Ifrit and interrupt its actions. The Ifrit's destructive power was unmatched, capable of wiping out an army as easily as breathing. While Wang Chong and the others had managed to restrain it, it was still extremely dangerous. Moreover, the King Ape was the only power Wang Chong could use to restrain the Arabs. Once the King Ape was killed, the vast number of Arab soldiers would be unstoppable. What a pity! Whether it's the Origin Immortal Sword's energy or stellar energy, they're all mostly ineffective against this monster, only able to wound it, not kill it. If this continues, in the end, no one will be able to stop it. Wang Chong had the King Ape continue its frenzied assault on the Arab army, but deep down, Wang Chong was still worried. The great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art, the Origin Immortal art, the art of God and demon obliteration, the Origin Immortal Sword. Wang Chong had used all of his strongest techniques, and any other opponent, even a behemoth, would have been dead by this point. But this Ifrit seemed to be the natural counter to all martial artists. Stellar energy was as much as 60% less effective on it, and even worse, it seemed to be constantly absorbing energy from the void. With each passing second, it grew stronger. This is bad. If it just keeps getting stronger and stronger like this, no one will be able to deal with it. Wang Chong's eyes twitched. This was truly a world-destroying beast. Moreover, Wang Chong glanced at Kitaba. He suddenly realized that Kitaba was far too calm. Even now, he had yet to intervene in the battle. This was certainly not because of his generous nature. He had to have some ulterior motive. He was waiting for the Ifrit to mature. Realized. In the distance, Kitaba sharply sensed Wang Chong's gaze. He took 2 steps forward and coldly chuckled. The Ifrit had been sealed for far too long and was no longer at its peak strength. With each passing moment, it would get stronger and stronger. The Ifrit needed time to recover, so Kitaba was in no rush. The Ifrit was indestructible, and by the end, the Tang would discover that no matter how much strength they applied, they would not be able to exterminate the Ifrit, only welcome the true and even more powerful world-destroying Ifrit. Not only that, Kitaba could use this process to weaken them as much as possible. No matter how these Tang tried to stop it, they would ultimately realize that their fates were sealed. It's about enough. Let me give you a hand. Kitaba looked at the distant Ifrit and stepped forward, and with this step, he left the elephant behemoth and floated in the air. At the same time, he thrust a finger forward, and the world howled with wind. Everyone stared in shock as a spatial gap appeared above the Ifrit, brimming with blazing golden energy, the higher-level energy of another dimension. Rumble. A moment later, a giant pillar of energy struck the massive form of the Ifrit, a waterfall that did not attack the Ifrit, but surged into its body. Not good. In alarm, Wang Chong made to stop it, but he was too late. The Ifrit had already grown stronger through the battle, and with the assistance of Kitaba's subtle realm energy, it seemed to fill in the missing piece and experienced a quintessential transformation. Roar! The injured, world-destroying Ifrit furiously howled. As if some hidden seal had finally crumbled away, a vast energy surged out from its body, and the already massive body of the Ifrit expanded, swelling to a height of 150 meters, 160, 170, and its strength swelled along with its size, its flames exploding outward. The temperature reached 200,000 degrees, and the black smoke from the burning of the surrounding air grew even thicker. And as it grew stronger, it also increased the speed at which it absorbed energy from the void. Kitaba had opened the passage to the subtle realm to give the Ifrit a hand. But now, the Ifrit looked up at the sky and began to extract energy from that unfathomable dimension. Ra! Another waterfall of golden energy sloshed down onto the Ifrit, boosting its power once more. And when its strength reached a certain point, a mysterious golden symbol infused with the laws of the world appeared on its forehead. Not good. Alarmed, Wang Chong gripped the Origin Immortal Sword and once more used the power of lightning. Dark clouds gathered overhead as Wang Chong and the sword transformed into a lightning bolt. Although the Ifrit had an almost unkillable body, Wang Chong had noticed that its energy source was located in its head. Destroying its head wouldn't kill it, but it would at least interrupt its energy-absorbing process. But the results this time were completely different. Buzz! Those two evil golden eyes flashed with lightning, instantly scanning the air and locking onto Wang Chong's figure. Immediately, a gout of flame struck Wang Chong, traveling several times faster than before. After absorbing the energy of the subtle realm, the Ifrit was now far stronger than Wang Chong. Boom! Even though Wang Chong unleashed all his stellar energy to defend himself, he still shuddered upon being struck by the flames, and his body was knocked backward. Your Highness, my lord, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, and Sishun, Su Hanshan, Li Sai, Chang Qianli, and the other Tang officers all paled. Wang Chong, an anxious Wang Zhongxi rushed in Wang Chong's direction, but a moment later, a massive fist wrapped in flames knocked him aside. Rumble! The earth crumbled away, and the flames on the Ifrit's body became streaked with white, signifying that they had reached an extremely high temperature. But the most alarming of all was what was going on under the Ifrit's feet. Look over there! Someone suddenly shouted. Beneath the Ifrit, the hard, rocky surface was slowly beginning to melt under the high temperatures, glowing red and turning viscous. A few seconds later, vast clouds of steam began to rise in the area within 500 feet of the Ifrit, all the hard rocks turning into hot lava. Moreover, under the control of some mysterious energy, this lava was flowing into the Ifrit's body and merging with it. The Ifrit's body turned from red to black as it incorporated the lava. Let alone the Tang soldiers, even the Arab cavalry were alarmed by this sight. While the Ifrit had been released by Qutb, this was the first time the Arabs had witnessed this terrifying ability. It's about time. All of you must die. Today, I will fulfill my last desire and unite the Eastern world. Qutb's eyes blazed as brightly as stars. Winds stirred around him, ruffling his hair and robes. Bang! Qutb began to stride through the air, advancing with each step. Under his feet, the air seemed as solid as rock. Qutb's eyes were cold and brimming with killing intent. For this entire war, he had remained in the rear and issued commands, but now this was no longer necessary. The Ifrit had exploded in power while Wang Chong and the others had expended their strength. There was no one left on the battlefield who could stand in his way. It's about time this war came to an end. Qutb's eyes flashed. Boom! A storm swept over the world as Qutb's energy swelled, a beam of energy rising from his body and piercing through the heavens. Qutb's eyes flitted across the battlefield and instantly locked onto Wang Chong and the other Tang commanders. Once I eliminate you, no one will be left to stop the Ifrit. Qutb's eyes chilled as he shot forward like a lightning bolt. Roar! But just when Qutb was about to step onto the battlefield and deal with Wang Chong and the others, a resounding roar came from overhead. The sky darkened, and Qutb raised his head to see the massive form of the king ape, its teeth bared. At some point, it had made a flying leap into the air from the distance, and it was now descending like a meteor, its two arms bulging with muscle as they punched. Ah! Cries of alarm came from the surrounding area. The Ifrit's transformation had so absorbed everyone's attention that not even Adnan had noticed the king ape, stealthily, making its way to the north to attack Qutb. Protect the Hierophant! The area fell into chaos as the Arab generals rushed forward. They had all seen the power of the king ape with their own eyes, so terrifying that it utterly dominated the battlefield. Although it could not be compared to the world-destroying Ifrit, it still ranked as a tyrant or hegemon. But as countless soldiers rushed forward, an unexpected scene took place. Boom! Terrifying waves of stellar energy rolled out from the area Qutb was standing, sweeping over the world. From his place in the air, Kitaba punched, his body seeming to be a massive mountain that stood in defiance of the king ape as it firmly blocked the attack. The two fists of starkly contrasting sizes clashed in the air. The king ape's fist itself was so large that it made Kitaba seem like an ant. But within this puny being was a strength that far transcended the king ape's. How could this be? In the distance, Wang Chong, who had fallen to the ground after being punched back by the Ifrit, saw what had happened in the distance and was deeply shaken. Wang Chong had been dividing his mind the entire time to control the king ape, and no one understood just how immense its strength was better than him. It wasn't surprising that Kitaba could block the king ape's attack, but what was surprising was that Kitaba could somehow be completely unmoved despite taking the king ape's assault while floating in the air. It was like he had rooted himself into the fabric of space. He had known that Kitaba was strong, but not this strong. There was no doubt that not only had Kitaba reached the subtle realm, he had gone far past the level of the king ape. Bang! As if in response to Wang Chong's thoughts, Kitaba's robe rustled, unleashing a vast sea of annihilating energy. With just one strike, the king ape that was several hundred times his size was blasted away. Kaboom! The king ape crashed into the ground and howled in pain. The massive force of the impact sundered the ground, creating a massive crater. Meanwhile, Kitaba continued to hover in the air with a relaxed look on his face, completely unmoved. Shock. Endless shock. Only those subordinates of Kitaba who had followed him for many years were unperturbed. Those like even Abu Muslim couldn't help but widen their eyes in utter shock. All of Arabia knew that Kitaba was extremely strong, but nobody knew exactly how strong. Not in Abu Muslim's wildest dreams had he expected Kitaba to be so strong that he could send the king ape flying with a single punch. With one hand, Kitaba had proven himself as the supreme expert of the continent. Roar! As the battlefield was immersed in shock, the Ifrit did not care. Its heaven-shaking roar immediately drew back everyone's attention. The Ifrit's body was now completely lava, and its body had reached a height of nearly 200 meters. Beneath its feet, the ground continued to melt away under the high temperatures, lava flowing freely. And from these rivers of lava rose men made of lava and fire. Unlike the previous fire men, these lava men were even stronger, packed with even greater destructive potential. The moment they finished forming, they flung themselves at the densest areas of the battlefield, moving with incredible agility. At the same time, the temperature on their bodies reached several thousand degrees. In just a few short moments, several thousand lava men had arisen from the lava flows and rushed into the Tang ranks. Everyone on the Tang side paled. The immense Ifrit, the extremely powerful Kitaba, and now these thousands of lava men. The great Tang had already been in dire straits, and with these numerous lava men, the situation became even worse. Bang! The white-robed Kitaba shot forward, ignoring the king ape and swiftly making his way toward Wang Chong. The battlefield was brimming with tension, and even Su Hanshan grimaced, a rare hint of concern in his eyes. As Kitaba took action, an immense pressure came down. Everyone listen up. Ignore the Ifrit and attack Kitaba. He has an object that allows him to control the Ifrit. Wang Chong's call resonated throughout the battlefield, and countless eyes turned on Kitaba. And Kitaba, who had been seething with killing intent, suddenly grimaced. Bastard! Kitaba glared at Wang Chong with a murderous intent that he felt down to his bones. He already had complete control of the battlefield, but he had never imagined that Wang Chong would notice the Ifrit core that he was hiding. The world-destroying Ifrit was a double-edged sword. Could kill one's enemies and also injure those on its own side. The key to all this lay in the Ifrit core he had obtained within that old well in Hemuhad. Despite his best efforts to hide it, Wang Chong had still managed to find out. That beast! Kitaba suddenly had an idea, instantly realizing that Wang Chong must have noticed something during his clash with the king ape. So that's what's going on. Kill him. Zhangqiu Jianxiong's eyes turned cold. The first to react, he immediately rushed at Kitaba. At the same time, and Sishun and the injured Gao Shenji also charged in Kitaba's direction. Boom! In an explosion of stellar energy, Wang Zhongxi blasted hundreds of Arab cavalry into the sky and also charged. But though he was the last to act, he was faster than all the rest. On the Great Tang side, Wang Zhongxi and Wang Chong were the only ones who had reached the subtle realm. The rest of you, support me while I deal with him, Wang Zhongxi concisely said in his deep and steady voice. Go! At the same time, Li Junxian, Song Yuanyi, and the others also put aside the Ifrit and charged toward Catawba. Wuxiang cavalry, hear my order. Charge! Li Sai raised his giant Wut's steel sword and led the Wuxiang cavalry in charging into the front line. The battle instantly reversed. That Catawba had a tool that allowed him to control the Ifrit was a surprising discovery. Everyone now realized that if they wanted to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, their hopes rested on the treasure Catawba had that could control the Ifrit. The Ifrit was unkillable. This could be seen from how little Wang Chong and the others had gained from their battle with it. Although Catawba was powerful, even able to overwhelm the king ape, he was still just a human. A human was beatable, had a weakness. Rumble. The battlefield rumbled with war cries as the Tang army suddenly went on the offensive and charged at Catawba. This sudden change in attitude caught the Arabs off guard, and their ranks fell into momentary chaos. Kill them. Protect the Hierophant. Don't let them get through. In the midst of the chaos, countless Arab cavalry charged forward to block the advance of the Tang army, even Adnan joining in. These madmen! Adnan was both shocked and furious. He could see that Wang Chong's words had caused the entire Tang army to change strategies into focusing the full strength of the army on surrounding and killing the Hierophant. In normal circumstances, when two vast armies clashed against each other to decide the fates of their respective countries, using a force of hundreds of thousands to kill a single man would be considered an absurd joke. But Adnan wasn't laughing. Even the infamous madman of Arabia was forced to admit that if they succeeded in taking the Ifrit core from the Hierophant, the Tang really might succeed in changing the outcome of the battle. Not even Adnan had imagined the Ifrit contained in the bronze cauldron to be this powerful. This Ifrit truly possessed the power to vanquish an entire army. Even millions of soldiers were nothing but ants to this unkillable monster formed from extremely high-temperature flames that could absorb energy from the void. The Ifrit could annihilate them in a matter of a few minutes. Clang, clang, clang. In a flash, countless soldiers clashed, their weapons ringing and their horses neighing, soldiers screaming as stellar energy exploded. The battle once more intensified. But while the Arabs could stop the army led by Li Sai, they could not stop Wang Zhongxi, Zhangqiu Jianqiong, and Sishun, and the other Tang great generals. The air howled as Wang Zhongxi moved with astonishing speed toward Catawba. Countless attacks came from the Arabs down below in a massive barrage, but Wang Zhongxi and the others dodged them all. In the distance, Catawba's face chilled, and his eyes turned harsh. As the legend revered by the millions of denizens of the Arabian Empire, Catawba feared no opponent. Not even Wang Chong exposing his secret could shake him. Fine. I was planning to kill you first anyway. Catawba stepped forward and began to make his way toward Wang Zhongxi, the winds howling as the two sides drew closer and closer. But to everyone's surprise, the first to attack Catawba was not Wang Zhongxi's group. Roar! Behind Catawba, the earth rumbled as a massive figure soared into the air and toward Catawba. Aya! Cries of alarm came from the surroundings as the king ape once more jumped at Catawba, flailing its fists. Damn beast! Catawba, sensing the energy behind him, felt vexed and angered. He was far stronger than the king ape, even when it was under the control of Wang Chong. But this beast had an extremely large and tough body. Not even the Great Tang's giant ballistae had been able to deal much damage to it. This was exactly why the king ape had survived until now. After knocking it aside, Catawba had not continued onward to kill it. This was because the king ape had an astonishingly dense body. Defeating it was easy, but killing it was not something that could be done in short order. Thus, he had chosen to ignore it. But to his surprise, Wang Chong had taken control of the king ape and had it come back, apparently wanting to use this beast to hold him down. Ifrit, kill him! As the king ape descended from the sky, Catawba coldly ordered the Ifrit to kill Wang Chong. If Wang Chong could command the king ape to deal with him, Kataba could command the Ifrit to deal with Wang Chong. Once Wang Chong was dead, he naturally would no longer be able to control the king ape. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the fists of the king ape assailed Kataba. In the distance, Wang Zhongxi's face chilled and his body pulsed with stellar energy. A moment later, an imperial dragon more than 1,000 feet in length appeared and streaked toward Kataba. Behind him, and Sishun, Gao Xianji, and Zhangqiu Jianxiong also entered the battle. While Kataba was surrounded, the Ifrit also began to attack Wang Chong. Swish! The massive right arm of the Ifrit swung, creating 3 flame whips that flew at Wang Chong. Meanwhile, the Ifrit's left hand clenched into a fist and sent a lava-covered punch at Wang Chong. Even before the massive fist and flame whips had impacted, the blazing flames and their extreme heat had already reached Wang Chong. Buzz! Wang Chong blinked away, not even trying to fight with the Ifrit, and charged into the Arab ranks. Kill him! The eyes of the Arab soldiers gleamed when they saw Wang Chong. Sensing the opportunity, they rushed over to him in a giant wave. But a moment later, a red sun appeared, upon which thousands of Arab cavalry were seized from the ground by a terrifying pull and dragged uncontrollably toward Wang Chong. Before they even got close, their energies broke free of their bodies and flowed into Wang Chong. The great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art. This was the first time in this battle Wang Chong had used the supreme evil art to absorb the energy of the enemy soldiers. Wang Chong had consumed a significant amount of energy dealing with the Ifrit, and he had to replenish it. The vast sea of Arab cavalry was the best source of nutrients. Now that the great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art had been perfected and reached its apex, Wang Chong was able to convert the motley energy of the Arab cavalry through the origin immortal art into energy that was purely his own. More importantly, the great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art was a technique that exemplified the principle of fighting a war to support a war. It strengthened oneself while dealing a heavy blow to the enemy. Aya! All the Arabs within a range of nearly 10,000 feet, so long as they had not reached the Saint Martial realm, had their energy seized by Wang Chong. An Arab horseman screamed, blood bursting out of every pore. Mere moments after he and his horse had been lifted off the ground, they were dead. And around him, numerous other horsemen met the same fate. Rumble. Moreover, through the terrifying pull of the great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art, Wang Chong sent those Arab horsemen flying at the massive Ifrit. These Arab cavalry were stricken with fear, but they had no control over their bodies. Before they even got close, the intense temperatures caused their bodies to burst upon in flames, and their armor melted away. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. It didn't take long for Wang Chong to absorb the energy of at least 7,000 Arab cavalry and have their bodies burned to ash by the Ifrit. The blazing balls of flame were frightening to behold. Stop him! An Arab governor furiously roared, clenching his legendary Arabian scimitar and streaking off in a white ray of light. He stirred up a tsunami of stellar energy that hurtled toward Wang Chong, attempting to slow him down so that the Ifrit could catch up. But in a flash of light, Wang Chong disappeared. Greater void step. Before the Arab governor could react, Wang Chong shot past his wave of saber energy in a blur, blasted through the governor's barrier of energy like a meteor, and slammed into his chest. Ah! The Arab governor screamed as blood splattered out and his organs were jolted. His stellar energy began to flood out of his body and into Wang Chong's. He deflated like a punctured leather bag, and in the blink of an eye, he dropped to the ground as a shriveled husk. Although it wasn't known if he was alive or dead, his chances appeared grim. Damn it! All the Arab generals were infuriated yet frightened. While they gnashed their teeth in anger, they did not dare to act carelessly after Wang Chong's horrifying display of power. Meanwhile, Kataba was also under heavy pressure from the combined attacks of the King Ape and Wang Zhongxi's group. Still, he had been keeping an eye on Wang Chong's movements. Bastard! Kataba's face turned ashen when he saw that Wang Chong was using the power of the Ifrit against the Arab cavalry. If Wang Chong were allowed to continue, he would eventually break the entire Arab army, and the Ifrit would have aided Wang Chong and the Great Tang rather than hindering them. You really think I can't deal with you? Kataba's face darkened, and as he punched away in Sishun, he changed tactics. Let's see how long you can last. Ifrit, kill those Tang first. Still have time to worry about others. Let's see how capable you really are. Zhangqiu Jianxiong's face chilled as he punched, sending a wave of energy at Kitaba. In another direction, Li Junxian raised the noble sage sword and sent a long ray of righteous energy at Kitaba. The full force strength of these attacks immediately pressured Kitaba and caused him to shut his mouth. Protect the Hierophant. The Arab generals and governors rushed over. But before they could get close, the king ape paused for a moment and swung out its arms, driving away the reinforcements. After doing this, the king ape rejoined the battle. Buzz. But elsewhere, Kitaba's order swiftly shifted the course of the battle. The Ifrit that was chasing Wang Chong suddenly stopped, turned around, and began to head toward the Tang army. Not good. This sight instantly made Wang Chong pale. Wang Chong had charged into the Arab ranks to draw the Ifrit away from the Tang army. But one order from Kitaba had nullified his efforts. Rumble. The rolling waves of heat seemed intent on burning away the entire world. The dazzling fire raging around the towering Ifrit blotted out the sky, and the fires were so vast and intense that it was hard to even see the Ifrit's actual body. And now that it had received Kitaba's order, this terrifying monstrosity was striding towards Su Hanshan, Chang Qianli, Li Sai, and Zhang Shouji, covering several hundred feet with each step. The burning red light made everyone's face rosy red. But the only things the Tang soldiers could feel were a terrifying pressure and the stench of death. Roar! The Ifrit roared, and more of the ground was turned into molten streams of lava that surged toward the Tang ranks. And amidst the surging lava men were constantly rising up and lunging toward the Tang ranks. A moment later, there was a burst of fiery light, and the Ifrit threw an immense punch at thousands of Tang soldiers. This punch could shatter the earth, and if it landed, tens of thousands of Tang soldiers would be instantly wiped out. Bang! With no time to think, Wang Chong shot in front of the Ifrit and tried to block the attack. Great Inyang Heaven Creation Art. Treastrimsa Heaven. Sword Chi of Slaughter. Wang Chong unleashed all kinds of peerless techniques with astonishing speed. The Ifrit was simply too powerful. Wang Chong had no other option if he wanted to save the army behind him. Boom! A majestic surge of stellar energy fiercely collided with the Ifrit's waves of fire and rivers of lava. The world shuddered and the fabric of space groaned. With the human and monster at the center, a massive blazing sun appeared and then erupted. Bang! Wang Chong's body trembled, and after a few moments of stalemate, he was blasted backward by the shockwave as if he weighed nothing. Even though Wang Chong was at the subtle realm and had all manner of peerless techniques, he was far from a match for this Ifrit that had once destroyed an entire civilization. My lord! Everyone on the ground paled. Wang Chong's body continuously flipped over in the air, flying several thousand feet before, finally, a burst of stellar energy erupted from his feet and allowed him to get his bearings. Flames and smoke were rising from his body. He was covered in wounds, and his breathing was ragged. No good. No matter what, I have to stop it. Wang Chong looked at the Ifrit and clenched his fists. Even though he had been pushed back by the Ifrit, Wang Chong was not backing down. In truth, the Great Tang already had nowhere to run. Bang! Wang Chong stomped forward, his body thrumming with stellar energy as he once more lunged at the Ifrit. But the moment he moved his body, he felt a tearing pain from every part of his body, and blood trickled from the corner of his lips. Wang Chong's heart instantly sank. Although Wang Chong had managed to shatter the Ifrit's attack, he had paid for it with heavy injuries. To use the mortal body of a human against the world-destroying power of the Ifrit, which was continuing to grow stronger as it absorbed more energy out of the void, was a trying task, even for someone of Wang Chong's strength. Roar! Another roar came from ahead. The flames on the Ifrit's body blazed as it once more punched in Wang Chong's direction. The lava flows were getting closer and closer, and all the water content in the air had already been burned away. Wang Chong could already smell his hair burning, and an immense pressure weighed on his heart. Even with the help of the great Inyang Heaven Creation Art, he was not able to completely recover from his injuries in so little time. Even his stellar energy was still in chaos at this time. But Wang Chong had no other options. If he stood aside, the Tang army behind him would be burned to ash. This is it. Wang Chong's eyes focused and exploded with formidable resolve. Even with his heavy injuries, Wang Chong still chose to fight to the death. The lava surged toward him, engulfing the world. Wang Chong's heart tightened, but just when it seemed like a fierce battle was going to take place, bang! Without the slightest warning, a powerful and bizarre psychic energy shot out of Wang Chong's bosom and struck the Ifrit with lightning-fast speed. A woo! The furious and unstoppable Ifrit suddenly trembled and leaned back, unleashing a howl like it had been struck by a heavy blow. Its aura grew disordered, and the punch it sent toward Wang Chong also rapidly dissolved into sputtering sparks. What's going on here? Wang Chong was instantly dumbstruck. Let alone Wang Chong. Even Kitaba was startled, fiercely glaring in Wang Chong's direction. What's going on? What happened to the Ifrit? Kitaba was shaken, his mind in turmoil. He had been battling with Wang Zhongxi, so he had no time to pay attention to what was happening in the distance. By the time he had noticed, the Ifrit was already injured. Bang! In Kitaba's moment of distraction, a resplendent beam of righteous sword chi slashed at Kitaba. Kitaba grimaced and just barely managed to dodge the attack. Although Kitaba was stronger than any single person, Wang Zhongxi, Li Junxian, and the King Ape were still capable of threatening him. Boom! Kitaba punched away Li Junxian, but he did not pursue. His mind was no longer focused on Li Junxian or Wang Zhongxi. The Ifrit was Kitaba's most important tool in his conquest of the East, and the smallest change concerning it was of utmost importance. His greatest concern was finding out what had happened to the Ifrit that could cause such a major reaction. Moreover, if it had been a simple injury, he would not have cared. This was because the Ifrit was almost indestructible, able to swiftly recover no matter what attack it received. But just a moment ago, the Ifrit had received an unhealable wound, and through its core, Kitaba could sense that it was in extreme pain, and it was afraid. This was a monster that had once destroyed an entire civilization. What in the world could wound it, even make it afraid? This was simply unbelievable. Kitaba was truly stunned. Wang Chong's mind was also experiencing a massive shock. Unlike Kitaba, when that bizarre and powerful psychic energy had helped him block the Ifrit's attack, he had immediately realized its origin. Nightmare Beast. Wang Chong immediately lowered his head, glancing at the Nightmare Beast core hidden in his chest in great consternation. He clearly remembered that he had sealed the Nightmare Beast. How had it broken the seal? Master, let me help you deal with it. In the midst of Wang Chong's shock, that familiar voice with its bizarre cadence and tone spoke into Wang Chong's mind. Its consciousness was locked onto the distant form of the Ifrit and was radiating fighting intent. It felt as if it regarded the Ifrit as a mortal foe. It really was that creature. Countless thoughts ran through Wang Chong's mind, but he quickly composed himself. Why did you break your seal, and why did you help me? And also, why do you call me master? Wang Chong sternly said, maintaining his wariness. He already knew how terrifying the Nightmare Beast was. In the underground, it had killed numerous martial artists. If Wang Chong had not been extremely sharp, he would have died himself. Master is master. You are my master. That man once said that I only needed to protect that place, and then the person I am waiting for would appear after 800 years. That person would be my master, and I would fight for him. This was our agreement. The Nightmare Beast spoke into Wang Chong's mind, and its words left Wang Chong in indescribable shock. 800 years. Agreement. Master. Fight for him. What did all this mean? This conversation was definitely not going how Wang Chong had expected. Who was that man? Who did you make your agreement with? Wang Chong was greatly shaken, but he did not reveal this in his voice. That man had many names. He was someone I grew up with, and I always called him Little Grass. But all of you call him Shen Yuan, or the Yellow Emperor. He was my master, the Nightmare Beast sincerely said. Boom! Wang Chong's mind seethed in turmoil. The nightmare beast's master was Yellow Emperor Shenyuan? How was that possible? Such information could send great waves through the entire human world. Wang Chong had never expected this, and he had not drawn any clues regarding this from the nightmare beast's memories. And 800 years. Yellow Emperor Shenyuan belonged to the ancient era, and by now, it had been more than 800 years, right? At the time, I thought it would be only 800 years. Now I realized that he meant that the person I was waiting for would only appear after at least 800 years. The Origin Immortal Lord also said something similar to me, and I thought that he was tricking me this whole time. He also said that there was disaster in my fate, and only now do I realize that he was right. I really did find the person I was waiting for. On you, I sense an energy similar to little grass. The nightmare beast's voice was extremely excited. It apparently did not care that Wang Chong had killed its physical body. The Origin Immortal Lord made a divination for me and said that when I lost my body of flesh, I would find the person I had been awaiting for several thousand years. He really didn't deceive me. Wang Chong was simply speechless. This conversation and all this information were completely beyond his imagination. He was the nightmare beast's master. The nightmare beast had been waiting for him underground all this time? Someone had prophesied his appearance several thousand years ago. And that person was Shenyuan? This information was simply too mind-blowing, and Wang Chong found it impossible to digest in so little time. Most importantly, why did the nightmare beast recognize him as his master? How could it see that he was its master? As if knowing Wang Chong's doubts, the nightmare beast revealed even more shocking news. You were able to pull out the Origin Immortal Lord sword and activate the power of lightning. So you must be my master. I can't be wrong. In addition, that sword is not called the Origin Immortal Sword, but the Sword of Shenyuan, Little Grass's weapon. Over the last several thousand years, no one except you has been able to pull out that sword and activate its power. Not even the Origin Immortal Lord could. He was only the temporary keeper of the sword of Shenyuan? Or perhaps one could simply call it the Shenyuan sword. Not the Origin Immortal Sword. The Origin Immortal Lord had never been able to pull out the Origin Immortal Sword, only acting as its keeper and guardian. Wang Chong was learning far too many things at this moment. He now knew that the Origin Immortal Lord had left many things unspoken back in his cave. At the very least, Wang Chong was sure that the Origin Immortal Lord had known everything about what the Nightmare Beast had said. It seems he already knew, but wanted the Nightmare Beast to explain itself? Given the Origin Immortal Lord's formidable divination powers, Wang Chong seemed to understand what was going on. But Wang Chong didn't have time for any more questions. Roar! A furious roar filled with complex emotions came from the Ifrit. At the same time, a savage and wicked mental wave crossed the air. It's you. You alien creatures are not dead yet. The massive Ifrit fixed its golden eyes on Wang Chong. No. To be more precise, it was focused on the black core of the nightmare beast in Wang Chong's bosom. Bang! Cries of alarm came from all sides. Anyone who had sensed that powerful mental wave, whether Tang or Arab, was stunned. The Ifrit had a mind, and it could talk. This was simply unbelievable. This had not been apparent at all before this. Only the distant Kataba seemed utterly unperturbed. The Ifrit naturally had a mind of its own. A creature that had lived for countless years and destroyed numerous civilizations could not be some unthinking idiot. Who could possibly believe such a thing? In the well under Hamuhad, Kataba had already understood this. The Ifrit had never spoken because there had never been anything that it found worthy to speak about. Just like how humans would not speak with the meek ants below them, the Ifrit disdained to speak with puny humans. What Kataba really wanted to know was what exactly was that being the Ifrit spoke to, a being that was seemingly on an equal level of existence. Why have you not killed them all yet? What did you encounter? Kataba dodged a heavy strike from the king ape, at the same time sending a thought into the Ifrit core in his hand.